Welcome to If These Walls Could Talk. I'm your host, Amber Kimmel with Kimmel Collective, brokered by Keller Williams Realty. Today we have Mason Yarbrough here with us of Revolution Mortgage. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. How was your weekend?
You know, it was a good weekend. It was a slow down from a typical pace. Had a lot of snow and a lot of ice, a lot of cold temperatures, and luckily we didn't lose power. And from what I can tell, I think everybody fared pretty good. So,
yeah.
How was your weekend?
It was great.
Awesome.
We, out showing a lot of houses. We still had a lot of people not from here who wanted to get out and find their dream home. So we slid across the roads and see what we could find.
Yeah, welcome to Texas, huh?
That's right, yeah. It was funny because their feedback was, I was like, are you sure you want to go out and look? And they said, oh yeah, I'm from up north. This is nothing, we're used to it. And I was like, well, I know you're used to it, but we're not exactly set up for
Yeah, we don't have snow
success.
plows and chemical trucks to de-ice the roads. So it's kind of a rodeo when you get out there on the ice.
It's a different game for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad, I'm glad that everyone seemed to survive.
Yeah. That's a strong work ethic to get out in 10-degree weather to show houses to potential buyers.
Well, sometimes we just have to do what it takes.
Oh yeah, I guess being a high volume agent in West Texas is definitely interesting.
Yeah, I'm always ready to go.
Oh yeah,
so
very cool.
Yeah, well, I know we wanted to bring you in to talk a little bit about the financing side. That's always a component unless someone happens to be in a position where they're paying cash.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime you're talking about real estate, there's going to be oftentimes a financing piece.
Oh, yeah.
And I know you have a lot of experience in that. And I was just thinking through, I know you come from a military background as well.
Mm-hmm.
What made you get into mortgages?
So after getting out of the Air Force in 2008, I came back to Abilene and started flipping houses. And if we can all remember what happened in 2008, the real estate market was really, really tough.
Yeah.
And so I had to kind of really think about my future and think about what I wanted to do and the outcomes that I wanted. And so I started building homes here in and around Abilene area, and I've been doing that for a little over 15 years now. I've had my real estate license, and the missing piece to understand the entire process was the money. And so I got into mortgages to really understand the process and to really figure out how the money works, and really look at the choke points in the real estate process and try to kind of help smooth some of those out.
That makes sense. Do you feel like your background in building, does any of that information translate or help you with buyers that you're working with when it comes to mortgages?
Definitely. I think, all the years that I've built houses, I really understand the confusion that buyers face on a daily basis throughout the whole process. When you purchase a house, there's an army that is behind each and every transaction, from the title company to the lender to the agent.
There's a lot of moving parts.
A lot of moving parts, and people don't understand that there's probably no less than 15 or 20 persons working on a loan and working on a transaction at any given time. And so really understanding the entire process from seeing bare ground to designing a house to lining up, contractors for the jobs, to finishing, to appraisals, to inspections, really, working with title companies, kind of figuring all of that out. I feel like I have a lot better understanding and can kind of guide people in the right direction.
When someone's looking at building a home, I know one thing that seems scary to me is interest rates.
Oh yeah.
Interest rates change, and what they are today may not be what they are when your house is completed. How do you speak to that, or how do you help set people up for success when you're thinking, well, I know this is my budget and what I can afford today? What kind of feedback can you give them to help them have confidence that when their home's ready, it's going to be a price that they can deal with? My
advice for most borrowers is to not get hung up on the rate. To really kind of focus and make sure you're not being married to your mortgage. So don't overextend, on the amount of the loan that you're trying to get. Make sure that you have contingencies in place. If you go over budget on if it's a new home, for example, having contingencies in place, having extra savings, having extra access to money, that if you do go over budget, then you're not completely cash strapped. We all live, in crazy times, and they don't make things the way that they used to. So we're always going to have extra expenses that we're not prepared for. And so really kind of giving people advice to not max out their debt to income ratios is a big one for me, just to make sure that people do feel confident and comfortable when purchasing a home.
Absolutely. I always tell people, I don't think it's any fun to be house poor. A lot of times, if you have been fairly financially responsible, what you actually can qualify for and what you want to spend on a monthly basis may not be the same. Well, most people can qualify for more than what's actually comfortable to spend on.
I think with, social media, modern social media can be good and bad because it educates people a lot in this process. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and so you kind of have to weed through that. But what I see typically on first-time buyers that I deal with on a daily basis is most of them have a pretty good head on their shoulders, and they don't want to spend more than what they're able to spend. And so I'm constantly having conversations with people like, hey, financially, you're good here. Like you can afford, $200 or $300 or $400 more a month. Make that your decision, but you've got plenty of room.
Mm-hmm. I think something that's unique to your industry that is not true across the board. We live in a day and time where I think everyone's first go-to is the internet to get information. And when it comes to mortgages, it's so locally specific to get real facts that are going to help you make the best decision for yourself. And so when I meet a buyer for a first time, a lot of times it is a backwards thinking in that they're like, I want to go find the house I want, and then I'm going to figure out how to buy it. Where they really need to figure out how I'm going to, what I can buy and how I'm going to buy, and then go find that house. And the reason that it's so important, in my opinion, to work with someone local that is knowledgeable on our market and that can speak specific to what their transaction's going to be is because taxes and insurance, things vary here locally that ChatGPT is not going to necessarily nail if you're asking them, what's my payment going to be on a $300,000 house? And people call me all the time and they're like, well, I want this $300,000 house, and Zillow told me my payment's $1,200. But it's very far off from facts.
Yeah. And I think that's why, talking to a lender first is such an important piece, is so area specific costs, and you're not kind of, shooting into a barrel of fish and hoping you hit one. So knowing all of the costs locally and even in this region that we're in, being inside the city limits versus outside the city limits, you're going to have different numbers. And so really kind of getting specific and understanding your options is really important to us as lenders.
What do you think are people's biggest fears that you encounter or run into when it comes to getting a mortgage?
I think a lot of people come from the place of embarrassment. I feel like, we all have blemishes on our credit. We've all, done things that we're not proud of, and we're in situations that might not be the best situations. And, just having that talk with them saying, you don't need perfect credit. You don't need 20% down. It's impossible to time the market. I hear a lot of the times people are trying to time the market, and some of us get lucky when we're timing the market. But, the majority of decisions can be made just knowing that you need to start sooner than later. The later you start, the longer the process is going to take. And so if you just go ahead and start the process now, figuring out what you can afford, figuring out the area that you want to be in, getting all of that stuff, getting pre-qualified before you talk to an agent is so important. Now, we live in a region where there is over 800 licensed real estate agents in Abilene. And it's funny because 95% of the agents do about 5% of the sales, and 5% of the agents do about 95% of the sales. And so there is not a lack of agents that will show, potential homeowners, houses before they're qualified. And what that does is it just makes the whole process seem super emotional, because that agent might, be showing them $400,000 houses when they can only qualify for $200,000 houses. And so when that news gets broken to the borrowers, they're like, well, what do you mean? This agent over here told me that I can, afford $400,000.
That's right.
And so just kind of taking that emotion out and just really educating the buyers on what the process looks like, and really helping them make those decisions is super important to me.
That's good. I think a lot of people, they're as you spoke to, they're afraid they're going to be told no.
Correct.
They're afraid. And I always say, you know, it's never no, never. I mean, there are some people that I've felt maybe no, never for you. No. But usually most people, even if it's no, not now, you're able to set a plan in place and to put them in a position where when it is the time, they're ready to go. And I tell people, or I see people who want to wait till they find, like I said, they want to wait till they find the house they want and then figure out how to buy it. And that's kind of backwards. To me, having your finances in place and knowing what you can qualify for is almost the same as knowing the balance in your checking account, your savings account, having a will, doing all these things to be financially responsible. It's just it's just another piece and component of that. And I feel like most investors and people who are in the real estate market on a high level are always going to know what that looks like. And there's a lot of unknowns, and I feel like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of things that don't make sense that you would only learn by talking to someone like yourself. For example, all the time I have buyers that tell me, you know, I'm making X amount a month and you're telling me I can't qualify for this little, I could write a check for it if I wanted to. And an example in that combination is, you know, the way they're paid or income. They just transitioned to commission from being W-2, so they have no history of that. But they're like, my income doubled. I'm making twice as much as I did when I was, you know, at my last job. So that doesn't add up and it doesn't seem logical. But when they sit down and talk to you and they understand the system, then it's easier to be, you know what steps you need to take.
Yeah, or know what steps not to take. You know, I think that's a big one you hit. You know, if you do have a steady job where you're on salary right now and you want to purchase a house, I would highly, highly recommend not changing jobs until you secure your mortgage. You know, knowing that your income is going to be great, there's certain incomes that we can't count, or we have to have a 2-year history to be able to count. And so kind of really having all of those, you know, answers before you start the process, I think is so important.
I feel like a lot of times that's something that's hard for people to hear. They don't want to hear that the money that they're working hard for, or, you know, has earned, doesn't count.
But I think having a checklist and knowing the things that you need to be working towards in order to purchase is so important. Just like sending your kids to church camp, you're not going to send them blindly. You're going to have a checklist of, you know, they need a toothbrush, they need a sleeping bag, they need flip-flops, they need swim trunks, you know, all of the things that they need. We do the same thing as lenders, and we kind of line out the things that home buyers need in order to purchase, because we do run into borrowers every once in a while that now's not the right time. You know, they need to bring their credit score up. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but there's some things that we can kind of guide and coach borrowers in order to be qualified, you know, 6-9 months, a year down the road. And if you don't start that process now, it might be 5 or 10 years down the road. And so it's very important.
Right.
So Amber, got a question for you. In regards to a first-time home buyer, what do you want them to know, and kind of what questions do you think that they would ask you as a seasoned agent?
Well, the first thing I want them to know is to call me. And let's sit down and come up with a plan to help set them up for success. That is really where it needs to start, and starting to put all the pieces together. I wish more people would call me sooner than later, because when they're left to their own thoughts and to the internet, feeding them full of information, and everyone that they've ever known, worked with, family member who's bought a house before, you create a lot of misconceptions and things that aren't necessarily truth to our market. So call me. Set up a time, come in, let's talk through. That is what I would wish every first-time home buyer would do first. And then what I'm gonna tell them beyond that, or the second thing that's just as critically important, is once I give you a high-level overview of the process and we get you set up with the path for purchase on the mortgage side, I want them to take some time and really evaluate what's important to them. To me, real estate purchases, whether it be an investment hands-off that you're not going to actually live in, or it's your first home, or you think of it as your forever home. I think that you need to start the process within yourself and deciding what's important to you, because maybe it sounds hokey, but to me, your home and your house is such a reflection of yourself, and only you know that. I can give you a lot of guidance and information on what's going to be smart as far as a real estate investment, where you're going to see a higher return on investment, and what's going to be maybe financially more profitable than others. And I can also give you a lot of feedback of things, pitfalls to watch for, and common big homeownership expenses that may come out. But beyond that, to me, what's just as important is what's important to you, and how do you want your day to day to look, and only you know that. And the more that you can communicate that to me, the more I can help you identify what purchase that might be.
Yeah.
And it's so fun. I've been doing this for over 18 years, and I love watching people find that for themselves, and they're the only ones that know that. So I would want them to know, spend a lot of time, make a list of what's important to you, because you would be surprised what's most important to you is probably not what's most important to the next person.
It's great information. One more thing that I want to ask you. What advice do you give potential buyers that are looking for their forever home? And by forever home, let's call it a first-time home buyer that's looking for a forever home. What advice would you give to that person?
Nothing is forever.
Exactly.
And
they're going to outgrow the house. Situations are going to change. There's going to be babies born. Parents might have to move in with you. Needs change. All of that changes. So I just kind of wanted to get your take. When people get hung up on wanting or not being satisfied with what they can afford now versus what they might be able to afford in 5 or 10 years from now.
I think that the real estate buying process is hard for that person who is a planner and who is a real detailed, committed type person, because you want to make a plan and you want to make this purchase along with your plan. And I think I've watched it over the years, and you have to do the best you can with what you know at the time and know that change is inevitable. And so to think of it as your forever home might be, not so much the case, but definitely making the best decision with the information that you have at the time, knowing that it is subject to change. And I think a lot of people think of buying a home as such a big purchase that you want to feel like it's forever. But if you're working with me and we're being strategic in what you're buying, I have a lot of people who buy, and then within a year or two, circumstances change, and we need to sell that property and relocate to a different area or a different home because of circumstances. And so if, I can help you navigate that. And
so we're talking small steps, steps after step after step, not just taking one big leap.
And knowing nothing's perfect. I think along with that misbelief or concept of this is my forever home, you have to know too that nothing is perfect. And whether it be perfect from the standpoint of all the 10 items on your wish list, probably not going to happen. Need to shorten that list down a little bit. And then also from the product. These homes are built by people, and people aren't perfect. And so you definitely want to, do your due diligence and get inspections and do things that make sure that you have a secure investment, but also know they're not going to be perfect.
Awesome. That's great advice. So one last question. What is the most frustrating thing that a lender can do throughout this entire process? I just want to make sure that I don't make this mistake if I work with you.
That's a good question. I think the obvious answer is lack of communication.
Big one.
Yes, and I know that you guys are in a hard spot because there's certain things that you can tell us and you can't tell us. And so sometimes that sets you up for failure, I feel like. But I've been doing this long enough to know that's not your fault. But communication is super helpful. And then also everything that you guys can do on your end to build confidence and clarity for that buyer. We lean heavy on the lenders to come in, and for you to come in and assist and lift in that piece, and knowing, because we aren't in the financial weeds of that buyer's situation, and so, but we want them to feel comfortable and confident. And so it's much more beyond you running their information and saying, you're approved, go buy a house. There's got to be more to it than that.
That's great advice.
Yeah. And then I think just from your side too, anytime you guys are helping set expectations is what gives buyers peace of mind and confidence in knowing, okay, this is what it should be happening. And a lot of times when they're just left to wonder, they fill in the blanks with the wrong information. So.
And I think that's a good point. You know, I just want people to know, as your lender, I'm going to fight for you on your behalf. You know, I'm going to fight with the real estate agent. I'm going to fight with the title company. We're not fighting against each other. We're fighting together for one common goal, and that's to get to the finish line. That's to get to closing. And then it doesn't stop there. You know, our care and our, you know, duty lasts far beyond handing the keys over. And, you know, just having that buyer be as comfortable as possible throughout the process, and just knowing that we all have their backs, I think is huge.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, you know, teamwork makes the dream work.
Makes the dream work, yeah. Awesome.
So I think that's important. Mason, thanks for coming in today, and thanks for helping buyers understand that the mortgage process should be their first step and not their second step. If people want to get in contact with you to help get started putting that piece together, how should they reach out to you?
I'm on social, so you can find me at Mason the Lender on Instagram. My office is located at 4400 Buffalo Gap Road, Suite 3200. And I look forward to answering any of your questions.
Perfect. When you guys are ready to start on your real estate journey, find us at KimmelCollective.com. Thanks. See you later.